Welcome to Joe's Happy Hour, a show about markets and life hosted by Joe Fahmy. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be regarded as personalized investment advice or relied upon for any investment decisions. Joe Fahmy is an employee of Zor Capital, and he and his clients may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. All opinions expressed by Joe are solely his own and do not reflect the opinions of Zor Capital. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on this program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Thank you and enjoy the show.
And we're rolling.
We're rolling.
We're rolling. Yahoo!
I'm surrounded by rock stars. This is awesome.
Yeah,
The rock stars are on that side.
what are you talking about?
Derek Sharp,
Yo, baby.
Canadian musician,
Canadian.
songwriter, producer, vocalist. You play multiple instruments. I can mesmerize when you play guitar and piano.
Oh, thank you.
Amazing.
At the same time?
At the same
time.
he plays them at the same time. He plays drums and piano at the
But
same
I'm
time.
most proud of my barista.
And I was
skills.
going to say,
Hold
I
on.
have it in
Yes.
capitals here, and barista.
See what I mean?
I know everything I know about coffee from this gentleman right here.
We're going to get to the coffee in a
Forget
minute.
the music. Let's talk coffee.
You've worked with many artists, Santana, Lana Miles, Sass Jordan. I think we've all heard of her.
Who's he?
Red Rider, most notably the lead singer of The Guess Who from 2008 to 2024.
Yes.
And you've co-wrote and produced many albums and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Anything to let my audience know out of that introduction that you want to let the audience know about yourself? Or did I cover it all?
You covered pretty much everything because I've been, like most of us, I've been doing this since.
You
For a
probably
very long time.
got to move a little bit closer.
Very long
Or
time.
move the mic back to you.
I can do this.
All right.
I can.
You've been in front of a
There
mic.
we go.
You've been in front of a mic
You know.
before.
and I don't always agree with everything I say, and I can't remember half the shit I did, but I have been, performing professionally since I was 15 years old.
Okay. That's
My
awesome.
first gig. Can I mention that? It was
Sure.
a Ukrainian wedding band.
Of course it was.
Ukrainian
Right?
wedding
I had
band.
to wear a frilly shirt.
Nice.
Nice.
That's pretty. Where was that?
But I
where,
made $150, and in 1979 or whatever that was.
15 years old, 150. Where was that show?
It was in Toronto or somewhere. It was whatever. It was a gig.
That's cool.
And I'd never gotten paid that much money before. So
That's a big deal.
like I really got into it to get laid at first, but that wasn't working out for me.
So what'd you spend the money on then?
You know what I mean?
But,
Nah, they didn't have those kind of people where I lived. Anyways, we won't get into
all
that.
right, we'll get some more, and we'll get some good stories out
Sure.
here. Dean Baldwin, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
SiriusXM host. Heard you on multiple channels, Classic Rewind, and so forth. It says on your website, specializing in creating engaging music commentary content. I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
it's a big line that probably says really nothing. Yeah.
But
I make content. Just talk about music.
You've been featured on a lot of stuff. Same thing. Anything you'd like the audience to know? Any sort of introduction? A little bit about yourself?
Probably the interesting thing is other than years as a musician myself, but at much smaller levels, local cover band type thing, the bulk of my career has been really in like internet startups. And then a few years back, started doing TikToks. And
I've seen you on TikTok. You got a huge following there.
SiriusXM reached out one day, said, "Hey, you want to do radio?" I was like, "Yeah, what the hell?" And went down a different path right there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
a great story.
Oh, it's great. That's a beautiful thing about content is there's multiple, what's the word? Platforms that we can do a lot of different things on. Brent Fitz,
Hola.
you have joined me and co-hosted a bunch of my podcasts. Just for the people who don't know you, they should all know him, but one of the top rock drummers in the world, worked with Slash, Gene Simmons, Aerosmith, Adam Levine, and Joe Fahmy at his birthday party.
We did play a gig together.
I'm just listing famous musicians you've played with.
You could play a pretty mean drum kit and piano. So I
Not
got to
as
give
good
you
as
some
this guy
props.
So
here.
can
Not
you,
as-
apparently.
Not as good as you guys, but
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
I've seen
I
him
keep
play.
it on the white keys. You guys play the sharps. That's D sharp.
Hey.
Well, yeah, right. E flat.
I don't play any flats or sharps. I just play the basic C.
Brent has the distinction of playing the most instruments in the Guess Who ever. of all the 150 members. He played drums,
pretty much every.
One gig he played bass, and then he played even keyboards at one point.
This is true.
As a sub.
He's multi-talented.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can make that claim. So you should get a trophy or something from a Winnipeg trophy, which would be a donut.
Donut hole,
a Tim Hortons coffee, and a cruller.
But you never had the chance to do the flute.
No, and
I
that's.
did though.
Hold on, Derek has extra skills we've never
Yeah,
mentioned.
but Derek didn't have the skill. I fucking did it out of necessity. And I didn't know how to play a flute.
Did you know how to play? You just
no. I played saxophone in high school.
Okay.
To whenever.
So it's in the Wynn family.
Somebody had to do it.
But still.
I didn't know how to but Sass had played flute when she was in high school. So she taught me how to blow into it. She taught me how to blow into it. And I just like, and it was just, I sucked for like 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And then.
Magic.
Like in one day, because the fingerings were somewhat similar to the saxophone, right? So. And I got it. Now I just have it sitting there, and I play it every day.
What else? I know, obviously, piano and guitar. What else do you play?
Yeah, everything.
Sax?
Yeah, I played drums. When I was in high school, I used to stay after school in the music room after everybody left. And in those days, they put out ashtrays at 4:00 for the adult in the school. And I had a deal with the janitor, and he'd let me in. And, in Canada, it wasn't like the States. In the States, it was very posh high school bands. But in Canada, they had the instruments that everybody played every year. They were full of every disease known to man, which is why we never get sick.
Okay.
So they had the trumpet, this and that. So I'd pick an instrument, and I'd learn how to play it. I wasn't very good at any of them, but I was curious enough.
That's still pretty, it's like musical curiosity.
I can play saxophone, flute, bass, drums. I did a bit of sitar, accordion, and,
I've been to a couple of your sound checks. Pretty magical. I could just sit there and listen to you play. Acoustic guitar is one of my favorite instruments.
Yeah, man,
I could sit there and listen to you play acoustic guitar for hours.
Thank you.
So,
yeah,
incredibly talented.
I'm an acoustic guitar owner.
Dean, you've talked in one of your pieces about Gene Simmons' line about rock and roll being dead.
Yeah.
And I want you to elaborate on that. I've always said, like casual music fans, when I ask them about rock bands, and I know that expression rock and roll's dead means different things to different people. But for me, I ask casual friends about rock bands, and I kind of lose hope that there'll ever be another great rock band, because I ask friends, who have you gone to see? And it's always the Metallicas and AC/DCs and bands that have existed for 20 to 50 years. Yeah. And I feel like there hasn't been, no offense for anyone listening, but any like amazing rock bands in the last, I don't know how many years. So does that tie into that rock and roll is dead a little bit?
That's actually been an evolving opinion over the last couple months for me, because I heard the statement. My gut reaction was, nah, can't be that. And I talked to Sass at length, and she said, it's not that it's dead, but it's done, meaning that the era that we like to think about as being that rock period, it happened. It did its thing. Now it's teeing up for that next evolution. And I accepted that, but I kept thinking about this. And I watched Gene's comment where he kind of talked about the same thing, that moment in time, we'll never be able to go back to that. I actually don't think rock is dead, if I'm being honest. And I could get on a soapbox on this. I think the rock fan is dead.
Really?
Yes, I blame the consumer.
You don't see a lot of the dads bringing their kids to concerts like, hey, I want you to see who I grew up with. I see that a lot.
Oh, that's totally what happens. I mean, all of us could say that. But we had a conversation about that today, right?
Yeah, so
that was relevant.
If you think about like the rock fan, there's the folks in my generation, nostalgia is a powerful emotion. So as you're growing up, the bands you loved when you were 18, you continue to listen to those bands and those songs.
Yeah.
So as you get older, you're really not out there trying to invest in new music, new bands. We're stuck on the past. Well, that's not good for rock. Right. And you have the younger generation coming up right now, and they're all about streaming. Streaming is not good because there's no money there. Yeah. So, who's buying the albums? So until the consumers, the rock fans understand their role in this, I think rock fans, maybe dead's an extreme word, but I hold them accountable, because everything Gene is talking about is the product of the reaction of the consumer. But we never want to talk about the consumer's role in all of this. They're the ones that have allowed music to get commoditized.
What about the mystery?
Well, yeah. I mean,
That's to me is the biggest part of it all.
Yeah.
That's what we were talking about earlier, is that when we were younger, a very long time ago, you never knew anything about the bands. You had your own version of them. Now everybody's on their phone and, you know, they're talking to their fans, like they're connecting with them.
Yeah.
Bands didn't do that back then. It was very hard to get information. And there was a mystique around all these bands, which made it like, wow.
Yeah. Do you think though, when I hear rock is dead, and I don't think it's dead, I think new rock, or like newer bands, is tough that's going to come up. Do you think the streaming and they're discouraged because it's harder to make money?
I think there are still people out there, musicians that get inspired. They say, hey, I want to be like that. And I even hear, younger musicians I talk about guys like Warren DeMartini and the Randy Rhoads. And so the inspiration is still there. I do think there's a frustration though that, they want to make music, but the reward isn't there in the same way. But you got people out there that can now release a song, distribute a song on a weekend without even having to know how to play an instrument.
Yeah.
So, why should somebody now invest 10 years, 20 years to learn an instrument when they can get that immediate gratification immediately? You start streaming, so we're commoditizing music.
Okay. That's a good point.
That's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, that is. Brent, what do you think? What's going through your mind?
You and I have discussed this before on some other.
I was thinking the same thing.
I'm fully caffeinated thanks to Derek. We just came from coffee. By the way, we just shot a music video today. We're busy.
We shot 2.
Probably actually about 4 or 5.
I really appreciate you guys being here.
I just
know you
came
guys have had
home
a full
from-
day.
I'm a little stunned. Too.
I did 3 shows in Texas on the weekend.
You're a machine.
I flew home last night, late night, got up early and right to shooting music videos. And now we're doing a podcast.
Music videos, yeah.
That's the new normal for us, young guys in music. No, I was thinking, and you and I've discussed this on some other conversations, Joe, even on your podcast, about just like when I was growing up, I didn't think about the money side. We are always good to talk about money here on this forum that we have here, but the passion and the love for the music was the first and foremost thing. Although Derek said he was interested in getting laid.
Yeah, and as soon as that happens, I'm out of here.
Sounds like you got more diseases from the instruments, though.
But I just hope the young kids understand that the passion and having, other heroes, is still there. And I don't know if when I was younger, when you were younger, we had these gods that we looked up to, Beatles, like all the architects of great music and guitar heroes and drum heroes. And, so there's a little bit of, I hope the young kids coming up in music also understand that there still is heroes, but they just don't get to see them because sometimes, I'll use as an example is my dear friend Slash, who I've been, in a band with for many years, but he is a guitar god to a lot of people. He's a legendary guitarist around the world, but a whole bunch of younger kids a few years ago discovered him in the Guitar Hero video game. You know what I mean? That was a whole different way of discovering kind of like a rock star, which is interesting. But anyway, for newer bands, it's just, I hope that the same template is like we would play. Derek said he's been playing gigs since 15, myself included. We started young. We started playing in front of people and getting all our bad notes out and getting in front of crowds.
We had places to play, though. There's a difference.
There is a difference. It's harder for young kids to go up in front of an audience.
And there's no club scene anymore.
Yes.
You'd go up to wherever you'd go to Dryden, start Monday and play till Saturday.
We always played 6 nights a week.
That's
you
what
and
I'm
I.
saying.
We had that.
And then it stopped around the time Much Music came in, which was the Canadian version of MTV, right?
Yeah.
As soon as that happened, it just started to. Then the Weekend Warrior thing happened. Basically, businessmen or guys that played say, I can play the same songs as these guys for half the price on the weekend. So, and it diluted the talent pool. And in Toronto, a lot of the the bar scene was amazing back then. You'd see, it was like going to Santa Fe every night.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
But it was like that caliber of bands. But these guys, as soon as that came in and the Weekend Warrior thing happened, they all went and started doing television, music for television or jingles or something that paid money. and it just kind of went away and never came back.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, now you don't need that talent. You can just Pro Tools and whatever, all these
It's not live.
DJs mixing stuff, but that's clearly, I don't know if the newer generation. I mean, that's all these EDC shows and stuff. I mean, it's a huge draw.
I mean, I'm not trying to slam that entirely because
No, they're great. There are some.
I
really
agree.
well, but even the tools, all the VSTs and the digital tools, they're great. They're great in time for a time saver, but they come at a cost. And if you think about, again, if you found a band that you liked, or the average consumer, if they hear a band that they like, what's the immediate natural, response to that? They go and stream it, which really doesn't put any money back to the artist. And yeah, until the consumers get back on the path of literally buying and owning music as opposed to leasing access to it, I think that's going to be a continued problem.
You think that can happen?
Well, I from a business perspective and having spent years going into markets and as a disruptor, because a lot of startups are all about that, we're going to disrupt an industry. Yeah, I think anything's possible, but you got to rebuild that relationship with the consumer.
Okay.
I believe him. Do you?
I don't know.
What is the
I
pause?
don't know.
I tell you this, if we can't, then
I'm
there's
thinking about it. That's what the pause was. I'm thinking
I think
about
that
it.
the fact that somebody is that interested and is trying to figure it out, he's not even an artist. To me, we need more people like that.
Agree.
Dean is determined to get new music to people of any caliber, even older bands, newer bands, whatever, right? I don't think you care. You're just, I think people are tired of the same old shit. And I love the same old shit. We all love the same old shit, but it's the old shit. I mean, if I hear fucking Sweet Home Alabama one more, and I loved that song.
Yeah.
But it's like, you need to create room for something new, or it just gets stale.
Go ahead.
The Guess Who album, Plendamore, was a transformational experience for me. Because prior to that album, I was your typical classic rock fan. I wanted to hear the old stuff. The new stuff's not as great as the old stuff. I kept playing the old stuff. And even the whole mindset of, well, if so-and-so and so-and-so aren't in this band, is it really legit? And then I heard Plendamore, and I was like, oh my God, this album's incredible. And I had to really come to terms with my own opinion on how I looked at classic rock bands. And it started to become really liberating once I realized that why do we treat bands that are called classic differently than any other business model? We don't talk about how the 77 Steelers aren't legit, or the current Steelers aren't legit because Terry Bradshaw's no longer in it. We don't talk about that with Coke. We don't do that with Saturday Night Live or the Globetrotters or anybody else. But a classic rock band all of a sudden will say, well, they're not legit because this person's not in there. And once I let go of that and realized a band should be allowed to iterate as well in order to put out new music to connect with a new and future audience to take the legacy forward, it just changed everything about the way I think about music.
Yeah, I'm thinking of 900 different things.
Yeah,
different ways I could go.
Well, what if the Yankees used the same lineup from 1977?
I
They'd be 90 now.
I went to see Queen with Adam Lampert at Madison Square Garden, and someone next to me was like, "This isn't the same because it's not Freddie Mercury." I'm like, "Yeah, because he's fucking dead. Like, it's not like you'll get like it's like these people who are like, it's not AC/DC because Bon Scott like."
Captain Obvious.
Like, why is that a complaint? Enjoy. Like, no one's complaining except the person sitting there like, this isn't, it's not Freddie Mercury.
Then why are you here?
Exactly.
Right?
It's like going to a comedy club and like complaining. It's like, you're there to laugh. So clearly music's not dead because I handed out to the class an assignment, and Brent and I have talked about this.
Yeah. That's pretty crazy.
I mean, the number one grossing concert, Taylor Swift, it's like by far double anything else, which is the U2s and Elton Johns and Guns N' Roses. So clearly music's not dead. I mean, it's people are going and they're spending money and on merch and everything like that. Any thoughts about this Taylor Swift phenomenon?
What's interesting here and talking about, I saw the report not too long ago that vinyl sales outpaced streaming last year. So vinyl grew 14% year over year versus streaming, which was 10. The number
and
one
CDs, obviously.
Yeah. The number one artist for selling vinyl, Taylor Swift. She accounted for 7% of vinyl sales last year. And when you look at the age group of her demographic, it's showing that the Gen Zs are buying vinyl. So I do think it is possible, but we have to find the ways to sell the value, to make that emotional connection. You know, people buy an emotion, they justify with logic. We've got to create that emotional reaction to get them the consumer to behave the way we want. I do think it's possible.
I feel like the only people selling records these days are like your top 5 or 10 artists, but very few people. You ask a casual person on the street, when was the last time you bought an album or a CD? Most people haven't bought one in the last 10 or 20 years.
And you can't find them. That's the other
don't
thing.
forget
You can't go to a store
Lady
to buy
Gaga,
them.
Bruno Mars, Taylor Swift, those are the ones I feel that are the only ones that do sell a lot of records still, in my opinion. But,
bands, if you look at Styx or any of those bands, like the one people we know anyway, you know, they sell them at shows, but I don't know how many people buy them to take them home and play them. Sometimes it's just a token. It's just people want to buy shit, right? That's why they still buy CDs. I'll guarantee you they don't play them because they probably don't even have a CD player anymore. But they sell them at shows because they're autographed. You know, we right?
Absolutely, yeah.
When our band, that we sold quite a bit of vinyl at shows because people just wanted a memento to go home with after seeing the live performance. But the live performance is the machine.
Okay. I just thought of something else you said. I heard Bon Jovi in an interview say when he works on a new album, he's very proud of it, and it's a lot of new music. But when you play the live show, the fans still want to hear the same hits over and over. So he's a little bit, and I'm paraphrasing, he was a little bit frustrated that I put all this effort into an album, and then when I play it, the fans are like, all right, I'm going to go grab something to drink or go to the restroom, and it's frustrating. Do you find... Because I know
dude, we went to Bryan Adams 2 nights ago.
Okay.
Here in Vegas, right?
Yeah.
And you know, our friends are in the band, and I was surprised how many new songs he played. And it was great. He had a video behind him and stuff like that. Whether you're a fan or not, it's the way you set the table when you do new songs. If you go up there and go, hey, we got a new song for you, you're going to hear about 50,000 groans. Right? Because they come for the hits.
Yeah.
But if you take them on the proper journey, they will fall in line, right? You've seen it. I saw it. We opened when we came out with Plan d'Amour. We opened with that King, that song, The King, which is so unguess who like, and it went over every night. It was the first song, you know, and but I've been in the situation where it's been the opposite. Because generally, either the song sucked, or
it wasn't presented,
or it wasn't. The table wasn't set properly.
Okay.
If you teach, because they don't know the song, they've heard these old hits on the radio 1,000 times. You know what it's like when you hear a new song. It takes you 20, 30 listens to even know it and to learn the words and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So you have to have that time investment. You can't expect an audience to listen to a song live the first time and follow along unless you teach it to them or you have the words at the back or do something to get them engaged in the song. So I think that really is part of it if you're going to do that.
But luckily, Brian's new music, because I went to the show a week before you did, and the new songs are fantastic.
But there's a lot of fantastic new songs. Jethro, we can go down the list.
Of
but
course.
I think again, it was the way he did it. The words were coming up behind on the screen, and he got the crowd to sing with him and all of that stuff, and that made it more palatable.
That's an art.
Absolutely.
To do that because
100%.
Being a frontman, and I've seen you, I'm not just saying this because you're here, I'll say this if you weren't here. You're a phenomenal front person, front man, whatever, because that's an art to engage with the audience, to not be like, this is a song off the new album, and I was like, I'm going to go take a piss. Like, I mean, you just don't, but you do it in a different way, and there's an art to that I think a lot of people can learn, is that to present it that way, to keep the audience engaged.
Well,
I
you
never
talk to people like we're talking here.
Yeah.
Like, because they're people. You know, if you're trying to put something over on somebody, they're going to know, right? I think that's what it is. My favorite front people in history are always people like that. It's like Dean Martin. Remember you used to watch the show when you were a kid and he'd look into the camera and he'd be like, and he was looking right at you. And you felt that he was like, you know, sitting next to you, talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the king.
Yeah,
You know?
there's an
But
art. There is an art to that.
That's what I mean. But it's just like they're so relaxed and it comes naturally, and you treat people like they're part of the whole thing, right? Doesn't it make you feel special when you when you go to a concert and they try to engage you like that?
The first time I saw you, Brent was filling in on drums, and I had like a 75-year-old lady next to me, like elbowing me, like, get up and dance, Sonny. And like, she was shaking her ass. And like, I'm
Did she
like,
have a cross your heart bra that you could put soup in? There were a few of those.
Derek, I've been on stage with you, and there has been bras
I know.
dumped on stage
That's what I
for
see
this
in my
guy.
mind. I was, oh my God. It was
It
like
still
my
exists.
grandmother's bra.
I'm thinking of the Carrot Top bit. You got to keep him separated when he pulls
Jesus.
out.
I was like, I didn't know they made them like that. And they were like,
Well, what you're talking about, though, again, goes back to the fundamental truth of sales. You got to sell on emotion and justify with logic. If you just stir the emotion, but you don't ever give somebody the logical justification of it, that's when a customer gets cold feet. They don't close the deal. If you try to sell purely on logic without the emotion, you don't get the impulse reaction. What you're talking about is you got to create an emotional reaction by making them part of it. And then you follow up with the logic. Now, there's another part of this, the price point of vinyl. I think we've got to find a way to get the price point back down to a point where it's not a premium purchase, but it becomes an impulse buy.
right.
Okay.
Are they expensive?
I think so. I think if the average, I think I saw it's still like over $30, which I think to make it an impulse, it's got to be below 20.
Fair enough.
Because when we bought vinyl when we were kids, $6.99.
Yeah, but you had to save up for and get a paper route for 6 months.
I know, but still, like
you're
$6.99.
You're
to
bringing
pay
back
for-
memories.
Oh my God, my
You're
dad
bringing
took
back
me downtown
memories.
to Sam the Record Man. I'd saved up all my money. I'll make this quick. I got like 3 albums. I put them on the back ledge of the back seat. And the fucking heat. By the time we got back to the West End, it melted the top record. I was
It's devastating.
That's actually a really important concept. Juxtapose that to today. It used to be your album collection was a point of personal pride. It's something that might differentiate you from your friend circle. It was valuable because you owned it. It's a differentiator. Today we live in a world where, one, you have access to the exact same playlist that I do. There's no longer a differentiator there. There's also no longer fear of a loss. If your phone breaks, if something happens where you lose access to this platform, you're not sweating it because you know you can jump over to another platform.
It's backed up in the cloud.
Right. So we don't treat music like a treasure anymore. It's just purely content. It's become a loss leader if we're going to look at it from a business perspective.
Very good point.
He's
Very
so
good
smart.
point. He is smart.
We were talking on the ride over. Japan, the Tower Records still exist. Tower Records used to be. Now in Canada we had Sam the Record Man and A&A, all those other. But in
A&A.
yeah. Anyway, in America, Tower Records was a force for many, many years. But over in Japan, it is a 6-level mega store full of brand new music, physical copies. And it's
vinyl mostly? Or
no, everything.
everything, even CDs. And
It's the best thing you could ever see. If you haven't been, to a
In
record
Tokyo?
store in 20 years like we used to,
Yeah.
I'll go to the record store and it was fully stocked. So interestingly noted is that over in that part of the world, they promote physical copies still, and streaming is not a thing. So what we are kind of discussing here is a thing more in North America.
it's a
note.
rabbit hole. I mean, we could
Yeah.
go on about this.
I didn't know that when you told me that. I wasn't aware of that.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of albums,
Yeah, maybe.
I read an interview where you were talking about 10 albums that changed your life.
Oh, yeah?
And
That I did?
that you did,
Oh,
I
okay.
understood, Beatles, Elvis.
Oh, was it for Goldmine or something?
Yeah, Beach
okay.
Boys. Like I got some of the bass Queen. I understand. I found Miles Davis and Tears for Fears
Yeah.
very fascinating.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. It's really hard for me to pick 10.
Well, I know it's hard, but
You know.
explain that. I know the jazz, but I'm
Well,
like,
because I liked everything when I was a kid. First of all, your albums were just hand-me-downs. I had this incredible Elvis collection. I had the original 45s with the case and everything, and they were my uncles. 'Cause my dad and his brother used to go to the radio station, and as soon as they were finished the what do you call it, the cycle of the single,
yeah.
they would give away the discs to the kids. So they had this collection of music. So I just listened to whatever was in the house. That's why I mentioned Glenn Miller and
Yeah,
this
you
and
mentioned
that.
a lot of it, yeah.
Whatever, polkas and whatever. I didn't care. I just loved music. I knew when I was 5 years old, I told my mother, this is what I'm going to do. I heard Rock Around the Clock on the radio. I was like, that's what I'm doing. And she was like, okay. And they just laughed. But Miles Davis, you know, what did I say? Like Kind of Blue or something? Or whatever. But
I don't know if some influence your like music playing and some influence your, you know, like
I love
thought
jazz
process
music.
and
I
stuff.
mean, jazz music to me is more of a relaxing, something to listen to. You know, I never really wanted to be a serious jazz player because I knew that would consume me. You know, and not many people run around and get to act crazy when they're playing jazz. But I just, you know, it's my go-to thing. So, and I don't think there's many people that don't know that Miles Davis record. It's so ubiquitous.
Yeah.
I just picked that one because it was kind of a game changer in jazz. It literally changed. It went from bebop to this kind of modal cool jazz. Everything changed after that record. The Tears for Fears thing was because they came out with an album that wasn't as popular as their big hits. It was called Everyone Loves a Happy Ending.
Yeah.
Right? And I listened to that record. It was okay. I listened to it again. It was better. About the 20th time, I couldn't stop playing it. And to me, that was as close as they came to Sgt. Pepper than anybody else. Because every song, it was just this journey of music. It wasn't like big, you know, pop hits. It was just this fantastic, you know, package. And that's something you guys talk about too, the singles market versus the album, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing now. I made the decision, which is why I did Plan Them More and the new one coming up. I'm going to make records now. I'm not going to make singles. They still have to come out as singles. But I like the idea of this this journey. It's like you're telling a story. Now, whether anyone's interested in that is you know, not up to me.
Yeah.
Right.
What did you guys talk about in the car on the way here? Sounds like you had a great conversation.
Well, they drove together.
I mean, we've had conversations, everything that we've talked about here, and then same thing with Brett as we're coming over here. We were talking about, again, I didn't know about the Japan thing, that you can't push streaming as the call to action from a marketing perspective, which makes a lot of sense then as why Towers is still a thriving business there.
Yeah. I want stories from on the road. I want some good stories. We're going to get into the Guess Who thing in a minute, but I want some good stories. My friend,
I got a great story. I don't know if I could tell it.
we can always.
The time you almost got punched out before the show.
That's a good story. It's not my story,
I don't
so
wanna
I'm not
tell
going
the
to tell
time.
it.
He
because-
almost got punched out.
Oh fuck!
You know the story, Dean?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. We should tell that story.
Punched out by who?
Well, we have a mutual friend, Will Vankovich.
Oh yeah. Well,
He told me to tell. He's like, you got to tell the story about the power going out 3 times in Texas at a show. Do you remember that? Power went out 3 times during a show.
You told me. I think you told me that
I
story.
did.
He said it was at the Do-Si-Do in Texas.
Yeah, that was a hokey doke gig. It was kind of a routing date, and they was in this club that, you know, it was like this cowboy club, and it smelled like chicken wings and pizza. And they got bigger bands, but the stage was very, you know, hoke.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't really remember that, but I'm sure he's right.
He told me the power went out.
I'm sure it did. It was one of those, you know, gigs that you'd like to forget.
Okay. He said there's another one of Jim Cale being ejected off of a plane.
We were talking about that.
Yes.
What? Which time?
There's more than one.
Oh God.
The other one where he's like getting busted up against the wing or something.
What?
Yeah,
Did he get arrested or something? Or
Oh God. Yeah.
multiple times?
Yeah, but you know, Jim, sometimes he would have a little too much or whatever, and he'd lose his passport, or he wouldn't be able to find it because he couldn't see either, because he lost it. He sat in his glasses or something. So when, you know, they'd go to board the plane and he couldn't find his passport, and he'd just get madder and madder and madder at himself. And and then he'd start yelling at the at the check-in lady and calling her names and this and that. But he's kind of deaf and drunk and this and that. So I guess they they called the police and the police came. All I remember is looking out the window and they have his head.
What?
Down on, I thought it was the wing. It could have been and he's just like belligerent, right?
Oh, no.
And they got his hand back here, and it just happened to be in Minneapolis where the agent was, and he had to go bail him out of jail the next day because they put him in the, what do you call it? The
drunk tank.
Yeah, the drunk tank.
That's
whatever.
a Spinal Tap kind of scene.
But
right there.
but the thing is, it's not fair to pick on him. But the funny thing about Jim is there's so many stories about that. I was in the dentist chair once. I can tell this because I wasn't there. And they have the TV above your head, while they're, and I see, they have that news feed that goes under the thing. It says, this day in history, 1975, Jim Cale bites the ankle of a stewardess or a steward on an Air Canada flight.
That was a ticker.
That was on the ticker?
I couldn't believe I was looking at this. And I was like, wait a second. Run that again. I was like, are you shitting me? Like it was like a
Bit the ankle.
Clearly not much happens in Canada.
Yeah.
to have this day in history, like a Jim Cale, he was probably a love bite, knowing him.
Unbelievable.
But wow.
Any interesting stories, just festivals or award shows, anything like on the road that sticks out to you as
Me?
memorable? Yeah. I know all Brent's stories, so.
Oh, I got it.
Mine are always arm's length, though, I will say.
I'm
not the guy in the story, meaning causing the issue. I'm usually arm's length witnessing it and sharing
But you
the
have
story.
good stories, yeah.
I do have good stories, but
Yeah.
sometimes we talk about them after. No.
Yeah, but the thing with telling stories is like you're almost if the person in the story isn't here,
Exactly.
you know what
It's
I
not
mean?
fair.
It might be a little.
Yeah, no, I hear. You got to be careful.
Like, that's what I mean. This story is really fucking funny, but it wasn't funny to one of the people, so it would be a little unfair to do it, I think. But
Yeah, we're not going to tell the story with naming names, but basically I had...
well, what happened was all right. We won't
Don't
name
name
the
names.
We won't name
Don't
names.
name names.
Perfect.
So
I want a good story.
Brent's playing drums. And
Yeah.
we're playing an outdoor band shell, and
I was playing bass.
I'm sorry, I stand corrected.
Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
Yeah, well, I can't remember
Because
what
I
he
played drums, bass, and keyboards
So this was one of the
in our
bass
band together.
times.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So it's outdoors. So I walk to sound check and I hear this music coming from the band shell. Like Gary's practicing his drums, sound checking, and this guy's playing piano. I hear this piano, and he's playing these eyes. And I get to the stage. He's like, Derek, come here. Isn't this how it goes? And he played it, and it was the same part as the keyboard player was playing, but there was one extra note. And the one extra note was like, oh my God, that sounds exactly like the record.
Yeah.
Gary's like, that's the way it was supposed to be played the whole time. He's been playing it wrong for 20 years, right? So
That wasn't my goal, though.
that
was to
no. It was
hide.
just kind of between us. Then he comes to sound check. He's coming. Gary says on the microphone, "You've been playing it." I don't know if he said it like that. But he goes, "Listen to Brent. Brent knows how to play it properly."
no.
Or he did something like that, and it was just so stupid. It was just like some little.
It was harmless,
It was
though.
like a harmless little
Yeah.
joke. Anyways, so we're like, okay, nothing happens. Fast forward to showtime. It's 5 minutes, 2 minutes before the show. He goes up to Brent, and he's like, his fists are up like this. He goes, "You trying to take my gig? You trying to, let's go." And he thinks he's we all think he's joking
Joking around.
and he's not.
Oh, you serious?
He's like fucking, he wants to like hit Brent and put him out of his misery, right?
He wants to knock that
And
extra,
there's
extra
this- and
note
he's
out
yelling,
of Brent.
and Brent's like, "What?" And right, and this thing's going on, right? And Gary gets up with his cane. He goes, "You stop that right now! Behave yourself!" And as soon as he said that, boom, the intro music goes on, right? And we have to go on stage, right? I'm pissing myself laughing. I can't contain myself. We had to go up because this whole thing and the intro music and this drama is happening, and now we got to go out there and go, "Hi!" All right? I couldn't make it through the first song, whatever the fuck it was. I just kept laughing and laughing. Anyways, by the end of the show, everything had calmed down and everybody was friends. But it was.
You wanted to knock that extra note out of Brent.
Like, this is what musicians, they're just so sensitive. Like, we're all a bit
We're very sensitive.
right?
We are. We're passionate. So I don't take it personally.
It's no different than any business, though.
Right.
People take pride in their work, and there's egos involved and everything else.
Well, it makes a good story. And then, and you can embellish that. Most stories get embellished to the point where they're not even true anymore anyways, but they make them even funnier.
I find it interesting how many band stories I hear that involve fighting, literally physical fighting.
Yeah.
Because you're right. In the corporate world, sure, there's conflict.
Well, I think alcohol has something to do with it.
Probably so, or some other substance.
How about Will? We should tell a story about him since Joe talked to him. Right? That was unfair. What did you do? Call him up and say, "Give me some dish."
I said, "Give me some good stories to ask about." My brother used to do stand-up comedy. I grew up in the comedy club, so I love a good story and that's what life is. A good story is better than anything else. Yeah. So that's why I wanted 100%. Stories.
I love stories.
People remember stories.
Well, the best stories generally happen in the van on the way to the show, right? Am I right? Or the tour bus. Like, usually the good stories are when you're together, but the conversations that go on, you could never repeat.
Of course.
Because there's a lot of sarcasm going on, and it can get pretty dark.
Yeah.
But it's funny.
Yeah.
Funny dark.
At the time when I get it. Can we talk about the Guess Who?
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to need your help maybe with this.
He knows
one.
more than me at this point. Well, actually, he knows a lot about it too because he's from Winnipeg and he knows a lot of the places.
I found it interesting from the story for people who don't know. The original members, Burton Cummings and Randy Bachman, were, I guess at some point, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're not happy with the newer version, which had a couple of other members, and what you were doing for the past, 10, 15, 08 to 2008 to 2024. So I found it interesting that nobody licensed the name or trademarked the name, The Guess Who, until Jim Cale did it in 1986. That's what I read in Rolling Stone.
Yeah, that's not true.
That's not true.
No, but you can easily find the truth.
Okay.
I think that was something somebody put out, but
okay.
I don't know.
From what I understood, so the band breaks up. You guys continue on with two other original members, and then my simple story is they were saying, "No, we don't like this, and we want the licensing and the trademark and everything back." Is that a simple?
No.
Or is that
no? No.
Or no, we want like a cease and desist.
No. It's like you have to kind of back up a bit. First of all, you say original members. They weren't original members. Chad Allen and the Expressions were the original members. The Guess Who. The first hit had a different singer, Gary Pearson, Jim Cale, and Bachman, and these other people, Chad Allen, and I can't remember the other guys. You know the story. Mm-hmm. They were the original Guess Who. And then Cummings joined. It's just the everything that happened when Cummings joined with the four of them happened in probably a 3-year period or something.
Okay.
I think 68, 69, 70, at which point they either kicked Bachman out or he left, depending on who you believe, and then that was it. Then they got another band.
Yeah.
So the way I remember it, maybe you guys know better than I do, but the band disbanded in 1975.
I did hear that, yes.
Then the other members, including Jim Cale, said, "We want to continue." Gary, Jim, and Cummings still were the partners. So the other two had to sign off for the band to go out. But it was, the band was Kurt Winter, the guys that were in the band, and they went out as the Guess Who. And it didn't matter because the other guys went solo and they went off to their own thing. But I don't know when this happened, but it's somewhere along the line when Jim went to the bank or went to his lawyer, they said, "Has anybody registered the name?" So and he said no. So he did it. He registered it. I mean, that was 47. I think that was probably in 19. I don't know the year, but it was way before 1985.
I thought I heard 80.
1986 was...
No, it would have been more like 79 or 80.
Yeah.
And then after that, you got to remember in those days when bands were out of fashion, they were out of fashion.
Yeah.
They went off the radar, so nobody thought they were worth anything. And they would play in bars. I remember going to see oldies acts, right? In those days, and you'd go see them I saw Del Shannon in an airport hotel, playing his hits, because that's what it was, his hit. but the thing, right? Because they were just trying to make a living. It wasn't this whole classic rock resurgence thing was years away. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure they thought, they're just going to be on the hotel circuit. It's going to be, they did. I mean, Kurt Winter did write some of the biggest songs. But the other thing is, at some point, and again, I don't know personally, but I'm sure you could find out if you talk to the right people, that Burton Cummings bought all the songs, the publishing, from a bankruptcy sale when Jack Richardson's company went into receivership with the Nimbus 9, which was it the record company? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know this story?
Yeah, I do.
And that's why he owns all the material. He owns Bachman's songs. He owns Winter's songs. He owns his own songs. He owns the whole catalog.
Okay.
Which is half the publishing. So and then, which is probably why him and Bachman have been going at each other for years too, because, I'm sure there's, I don't
think he owns the first two albums, because Burton, the first two Guess Who albums, Burton wouldn't join until I think album number 3.
Okay.
I think there was 2 years of the Guess Who before he came on board. And I think I remember when all that went down last year, I went and looked after Burton pulled the licensing, and I think the songs from the first album were still out there.
So, but the point of the story is, no matter what happened is what happened. And God love you for trying to make as much money as you can. I don't put that. But it was, 40 years later?
That's what I find surprising.
It was surprising. When I joined the band, first of all, I thought I was only going to be, I was filling in for a couple of weeks. I didn't think I was going to stay. But the singer got in an accident and he just didn't get well fast enough. So I ended up being the singer.
So Jim wants to go on and continue with the band.
He did. They played 250 shows a year in a van, playing every night. Ask Leonard Shaw, who was in the band with us. He was in the band he was in the band for 35 years.
Okay.
And they were basically playing in clubs, right?
Yeah.
Playing a version of the hits every night.
But so why? Again, that's why I said, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm admitting I don't know enough of you guys that all know way more than I do. I just want to kind of not clarify, but just to help me understand. You're doing this for years. The fans love it. I've been to a lot of shows. Mm-hmm. I've been grateful that you guys invited me, and I've seen you play, and I love it. And everyone loves it. And then why 30, 40 years later does this come up?
That is the question. In fact, I'm working on a documentary on this topic, because I also found it interesting that it wasn't until Pledin' to More that it seemed like this really struck a nerve.
It started to get successful. We started we were up to almost 2 million streams, which the first record we did with Rudy and Will didn't do that well. It was okay. It was our first try, because, the reason we did this is because Gary wanted to do that. He didn't want to play the same old songs over and over the rest of his life.
So he was encouraging it.
That was his whole thing. It was really because of him. He just heard some of my songs. He goes, I want to do that. I want to do this song. Okay. Are you sure? Right. But he felt that it was like the Yankees. Right. The Guess Who has had 4 successful versions. I don't know. You go through, you know more about this than I do, but there were more than one successful version of the Guess Who. So he figured, let's just continue it, but let's do our part and just That's why we did a right turn. We didn't. They're like, it doesn't sound like the Guess Who. Of course it doesn't. It's 5 completely different people. Just like when Bachman left the Guess Who and the guys from Brother came in, right? Which was a band in Winnipeg. Their sound changed after that.
Sure.
And Troiano joined. The sound changed again.
Which isn't unheard of. You look at Journey.
Yes.
Yes. Journey.
This is a normal.
It's a normal thing. It's
thing.
the natural progression of things. But as far as what happened, I guess you have to ask them. But my opinion is they felt that it was tarnishing their own legacy because it was their part in it was the most successful. I mean, really, Joe, when we did shows in the U.S., nobody knew who was in the band, but they knew one song, American Woman. And then you played These Eyes. Oh, yeah, I know that song. You played No Time. Oh, yeah, I know that song. But they all know American Woman.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Because it's been covered. It's been in movies, whatever. It's a big, big song. Right? So, and that's because of them.
I think there's another really important point and a differentiator between your iteration of the Guess Who and some of the other classic rock bands. Mm-hmm. When I saw the band play January of 2004, 40% of the set list was new music. Nearly half of the set list was new music.
That's true. That is true.
04, you mean 24.
24. What did I say?
You said 04. Yeah, I know you meant 24.
So
Yeah,
we're almost at
in other words, very
the,
recently. Yeah. Like a year ago.
Yeah. And I have, you've seen the video. You were there. You know what it's like. The people, they were starting to sing all the new songs.
Yeah.
That's a fact. We have proof of that. Now, the lawsuit, obviously, was they sued, these two guys personally. And the lawsuit was because they felt that these two guys used them to advertise shows.
I read that, and because this is my show, I can say this. Complete bullshit.
Well, you were there. How many Guess Who shows have you been to?
Never,
and we signed autographs.
Two things. I never went to a show where I saw anyone on an image. Even when Will left and you had another guitarist come, you updated that image. Mm. I never saw an image with any of the.
Well, you have to, because then you would be fraud.
Yeah.
That would piss me off.
That's where I read that. I'm like, fraudulent. Like it was false advertising and fraudulent. I'm like, number one, that in my view, that was never, ever. I never saw an old, it's like an AC/DC billboard with Bon Scott. Like you don't see that, right? And the second thing is, I never heard of anyone show up at the show and say, oh, wait, I was expecting someone else. In fact, it's the opposite. It's everyone around me dancing, having a great time of all ages. Get up off your ass and dance, Sonny. Like everyone was enjoying themselves. And I'm like, that's my own opinion.
Well,
casual.
I was in the band 16 years, and we had a lot of, we played to a million, 2 million people in that time, so, and there were a lot of repeat customers that would come to shows. But as far as, I don't think that's what it was about. Dean knows more about that than me, about how the lawsuit and the litigation things happen. Those kind of things don't usually happen in Canada, do they? I don't know. I don't know much about the legal system. We take each other out
to the back of the venue and beat each other with a hockey stick.
When you litigate something long enough, you get to that one you've heard this story with Rat and these other bands. They've all been through their version of a lawsuit.
Yeah, I've heard that with different bands.
Somebody's going to run out of money at some point.
Mm-hmm. But you weren't involved in it was just those two members against the other two. You were.
This isn't my fight.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I was in the middle of it, and I honestly don't really harbor any ill will towards anybody. They did what they had to do. These people are my friends. And I don't feel good about the fact that they're bankrupt now at 80 years old. I don't think that's fair, but that's just my opinion.
I didn't know that part.
That and a $5 will get right.
I thought it was disappointing because what I saw was a classic rock band that had the potential to create a new model, to create become an example for other classic rock bands that, yes, you can put out new music. You can build and create a new audience that will take you into the future. And everything that they were showing was working. Streaming was going up. The audience was accepting the new music. I mean, my stepmom was in that show, and she going to it, she was excited to hear the hits. Afterwards, she was blown away by the new music. She loved it to the point that she started contacting all of her old high school buddies up in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, saying, you got to check this out. Because you guys followed up a few weeks later there. She sent all their friends there. So we were seeing it work. And I think if Plendamore did not have the success it was, I don't know if you would have seen Burton do the nuclear option with his licensing.
Yeah, you could be right.
I hate ego. I hate jealousy. I hate all that bullshit. And
what I like is that despite all this, there is new music and a celebratory thing of you have a whole new record of.
Well, that's really what had happened. I mean, they got their wish, and I'm fine with it. I don't care. They didn't want those. You know, there were people. I mean, even friends of ours would say to me from time to time, you know, why are you putting your music out as the Guess Who? Why don't you just do it yourself? That question came up a lot.
Sure.
And my answer at the time was, my life is consumed by this band because we're playing all the time. And I live in Canada. So, you know, I have to fly out the day before, then do the show, and then fly somewhere else. So the travel days, including the shows, I was out 3/4 of the year. When am I going to have time to put out my own record and promote it properly? And I already had a band.
You're already associated with it, yeah.
Well, and also, he'll tell you, it's hard to you know, bands need to be nurtured. You can't just put a bunch of great players in a room and expect it to be good. Unless you're Santa Fe and Fat City Horns. But anyways, other than that, bands need to rehearse. They need to play in front of people over and over and over again and then the band becomes good, right? I'm sure you're the same thing with Slash. When you started out, you were one thing, and then you get to the point where you don't even think about it anymore. You just know what this guy's going to do, and you know what that guy's going to do.
100%.
But that takes time. So I had these guys that we already knew each other. We all played together all the time. So it was just the logical thing to do. So that was my answer.
I do want to comment, though, because during the whole brouhaha that kicked off about this time last year with me and Burton's team, very public Facebook argument, a lot of Burton's fans were saying, well, if the album is so good, then just launch a new band. I don't think that's a fair statement. Nobody's saying, look, the new Corvette looks more like a Ferrari. It looks nothing like the historical Corvette. So rather than calling it a Corvette, Chevy, why don't you just create a new product if you think this is the design that's going to work for you, and call it something else? It's not fair. We don't do that with anybody else. And as you said, it's hard to launch a brand new band.
Well, all those guys are putting out new records, right? How well is that doing? And it's not because it's not good. It's because there's no radio to play the same 10 songs over and over and over again, to give yourself a chance for those people to know those songs, right? Back to what we were talking about earlier. Everyone's it's a level playing field. They could say, yeah, if your record's so good, why don't you just do it yourself? Okay, I will. Why don't you do it too?
Yeah, in the financial world,
Right?
Paul Tudor Jones is like legendary hedge fund manager, and he has an expression, you either adapt, evolve, or die.
Right.
Which is, I think, not just in the markets, because sometimes the markets are going to, but in business and in music, there's streaming change things. You got to adapt. You can't be like, well, I want it to be this way. Well, things change in life.
And it's not, that's the thing about these classic rock artists. You know, they did stuff that was so good, but it's part of the fabric of everyone's musical experience. But the greater percentage, and I'm talking probably in the 95 percentile, never achieve that ever again. You know, you have a few people like Bryan Adams, and you could even say Aerosmith, that continued, Tom Petty, decade after decade after decade. But most of them,
very rare.
Right? This, and then, not that their albums are shitty, it's just it never achieves that again. So
Yes.
I would say, that's what I would say to anybody. You know, well, if you think it's easy, you do it.
There's also a bias against bands that are called classic.
Oh, of course.
You know, and if you think about it, Taylor Swift will be eligible for the Hall of Fame in 6 years. Technically, at this point in time, we should be calling her a classic, but we don't slap
How does that
that
make
label.
you feel, Joe?
We don't slap that label on any other bands except for those in a very specific time period. And to your point, there's not a radio. I've heard it firsthand. We don't play music from classic bands on a radio that focuses on emerging talent, and classic rock radio doesn't play new music. So where do you take your music to? What channel?
Well, you have to have. You could probably speak about this better than anyone because you play with somebody that's so famous that people will come to see him no matter what you do. And it's not to say that what you guys are doing is great. However, he's so famous that I think people are always going to come out to at least see it, to give it a chance. But there's very few people like that. In his case, there's this famous guitar player that was in a band that everybody knows around the world. In our case, it was just a band name that everybody knew. Everybody has a version of it.
But I like being in the band that writes all the new music, to be honest with you.
Absolutely, 100%. But
I thoroughly enjoy
what
it.
I'm talking about isn't that so much as at least you have a foot in the door, right? If you're coming out of nowhere, it's hard to get a foot in the door.
Yeah. The reason I brought up the trademark thing is because when I read the article, and again, it was just a Rolling Stones article. I apologize if I misspoke earlier,
okay.
But it was more of, I just feel like it's a company that started a company and they're like, oh shoot, we forgot to buy the website. And like, now you get pissed off. Like, maybe that's not it. But my feeling was like, okay, you don't own the rights to it. And it was a little bit of bitterness is my feeling. But that's my interpretation of how I read the article.
You didn't misinterpret it. I think the Rolling Stone articles were wrong. That's my opinion, but based off of the research I did, I think they were biased.
Well, because only one side was
quoted.
Was quoting.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't even know if they know none of us know what really happened because it's such a long, it's 65 years of whatever it is, and none of us are really involved. And you can speculate till the cows come home.
Right.
But
that's the one thing I've talked with Brent about before in a couple of these is that people underestimate this is like everyone thinks it's the rock star life and it's just sex, drugs, and rock and roll and you're famous and everything's amazing. And they forget that you guys are human and there's relationships and there's business and there's health issues and stuff that everyone has to deal with. And people forget that because they see the spotlight and they think everyone's invincible, but they forget that there's normal life shit that happens to everybody.
True. But I'm kind of like that. When I go to a concert, I don't think about what their real lives are like.
No, I mean when you go to a show and you see somebody on stage, yes, you're not thinking that at the time. Yeah. People forget that,
it's not glamorous.
You see someone and you're like, oh, they just broke up with this, or they just had, what
do they say? You get paid to travel, right? Everybody says that.
The gigs are free. We'll always play for free. We get
paid to travel
in the other 23 hours of the day. It is absolutely true.
Yeah.
It's not that bad.
I said we'd come back to, and thank you for sharing that. And I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I said we'd come back to your real job, which is as a barista.
Yes, baby.
That's your specialty. I've heard you're quite the master.
It's a work in progress, like everything. But I started 20 years ago before YouTube and trying to find somebody that could tell you how to do latte art when you didn't live on the West Coast was very challenging. I went to Vancouver and I was on a tour with my friend and we went into this coffee shop and they poured a picture on a coffee. Yeah. I was like, what?
You've taken me some places where I've seen that art and I'm blown away by that.
I'm like,
yeah,
I got to figure this out, right? Because I always liked espresso and I had a machine. So I started the journey, and there was one place in Toronto. This guy had a place, and he put hearts on coffee. So I used to have to drive all the way downtown to go there, and I harassed him. He almost kicked me out a few times. I harassed him and I used to go on forums, like trying to find out how to do it. I wasted a lot of milk.
I have to say this, Derek. So your influence. Influencers today are a big deal, right? Mm-hmm. They are the new rock stars. Mm-hmm. Derek, as a influencer, you don't even know it.
I guess.
But check this out. So the whole weekend, I'm out. I just did 3 shows in Texas, okay? Drank a lot of coffee with my dear friends that I was on tour with. And I realized when we went to the coffee shops, because this is all we do now, we play music and we go to coffee shops. And my dear friend Phil X, who I was playing guitar with, he's like, let's get some cortados. Well, the word cortado and it's all about Derek Sharp here. Is years ago, this is what's awesome, is what I learned from playing in a band with Derek was how to get coffee together on the road. Because the first day we toured together, I go, maybe we're at Starbucks, and we go to order, and I go, I'll have a latte, and he goes, well, too much milk. And I was like, what?
Did I say that?
So you instantly said,
it is.
well, have you ever had a cortado? And I'm like, nope.
Did I say that?
You did.
Wow.
So you gave me my first cortado, and it's been a life-changing experience. And I, on Instagram, post coffees all around the world. I've literally sipped coffee in 50 countries or more since our first cortado together.
You've influenced him, and he's influenced me.
See? Do you not drink cortados?
Yeah, but I have a
There you
friend.
go.
She just buys the regular stuff at the grocery store, and he's introduced me to different beans and different stuff. And she's like, oh, it's like life changing.
Well, Brent, I'm curious. Have you tried the monkey poop coffee?
Yeah.
What'd you think? I've never tried, but I'm curious.
Kopi Luwak or something.
Yeah, Kopi Luwak.
Yeah, it's Indonesian or something.
But that's coffee. We're talking about
Those are
espresso.
beans. Yeah,
There's the difference.
It didn't taste any different to me. It was very expensive.
My ignorance now.
I know all about it though.
No, I made Dean's
It's cat
head
shit.
spin when
Cat
we were in
shit,
Turks and Caicos. I started. He asked a question, and I went down the rabbit hole with him.
So I bought an elaborate
guy.
machine that does everything. And do you use different beans?
That's nice of you.
No, I mean, I heard your machine is. No, in other words, I don't have I used to
Nobody
have a
has a
Keurig.
La Marzocco in their kitchen.
I heard your machine is like
Derek's kitchen is
like Italian
Yeah,
restaurant.
but the machine I learned how to do latte art on wasn't that. It was my first machine. It was very basic because it's not the machine.
It's the man.
What is it, Brent?
I know, but I'm trying to prop
It's
you
the
up.
grinder, and it's
yes.
the beans.
Yes.
And it's
That's
the
what
freshness of the beans. If there's no date on the bag, you should not buy your coffee beans because coffee beans degas slowly after they're roasted to the point where there's no air left. And that little beautiful foam you get on top comes from that gas.
Okay, so that's the question is, I was getting to the beans.
Here we go.
Don't
we have a concert to go to?
We do. We
got to wrap this up. People are like, okay, now we're going coffee.
This is important to me. It's my fucking show.
Now, I do have a question for you, though, before you.
All right. Okay. So my machine does every Americanos, espressos, latte, Do I want to use different beans and regular coffee? Do I want to use different beans for different things?
If you like different flavors.
Like if I'm going to do an espresso, but I have coffee beans, I still put the coffee beans in and hit the espresso.
Well, you want to use an espresso style roast, I would say. But those automatic machines, they do all in one. I don't know a lot about them. But espresso and coffee are two different conversations.
Okay.
Espresso is they use pressure to get water through coffee in 27 seconds. Coffee is a much coarser grind, and you pour over, and it blooms, and it goes through.
But the machine does the different things, though.
Well, espresso pushes it through fast. Coffee comes out slowly.
Yes.
And they taste completely different.
Correct.
Right? So it depends what you're talking about. You're talking about coffee, you're talking about espresso, because they're two different.
No, the reason I'm asking is because I do espressos or Americanos, but I use coffee beans if that's what I have. And am I screwing that up?
Well, my advice to you is don't get something too dark, because if it's over roasted and too dark, like really old school Italian espressos that are oily, it'll gum up your machine because the oils from the coffee will gum up the grinder. I would get probably like a medium dark roast. Because number one, the darker the roast, the less caffeine. Espresso has less caffeine than coffee. Not many people know that. He does.
So when people get a shot of espresso, it's less caffeine.
Yes.
So you go to Starbucks and you order a blonde roast that has
the lighter the roast,
it's a lot more caffeine.
Like Dunkin' Donuts and Tim Hortons, all that. Those coffees are jacked up on purpose. That's why people are so addicted.
Oh yeah.
To it, right?
Yeah.
Espresso just tastes like it's strong.
But it has less caffeine.
There's maybe 20 milligrams of caffeine in an espresso, but there's like 100 to 150 in a donut shop coffee.
So when you go, what beans do you use?
I have a local roaster that I support.
Okay.
He's out in the country.
And if you were in LA on tour and you had no choice and you go to a local supermarket,
he knows. There's nerdy brand. There's the Intelligentsia out of Chicago. There's
that's
Cafe
at Whole Foods.
Vivace.
That's at Whole Foods, right? The Intelligent, isn't that?
I
Whole
don't know,
Foods?
but they're
You
a
can get the
very
beans.
famous espresso roaster out of Chicago. They're all over the country. There's one in LA, right on
Oh, yeah.
Abercrombie.
Yep.
Then there's 49th Parallel out in Western Canada. There's Cafe Vivace. There's a bunch on the West Coast.
Blue
And I don't
Bottle. Blue Bottle's around.
even- and there's Cartel. There's a million of them all over because they're everywhere now.
Yeah.
Right? They're all over. We used to remember trying to find. We'd always find the college town. That was the best place to find coffee. As long as there was a university or a college, there was always this indie coffee shop that had great espresso. Before that whole thing happened. Now they're everywhere.
Okay.
Right? We can walk down the street and we'll find a good espresso shop now.
Derek would have been a horrible one for the Folgers commercial. We secretly replaced.
Yeah, I don't even care. I'll be honest with you. I don't even drink the milk drinks. I just make them for Sass every morning so I can practice. I just like straight espresso, and I only have 2 a day. It's not like I'm a coffee junkie.
Oh, we're coffee
To
junkies.
me-
We drink like it's
right.
It's like water all
and
day.
that's cool.
I've had 4 today.
I just like the process. It's like playing guitar or singing or something like that. It's just like this journey that I'm into, and I understand why no sane person would ever do something like that.
You had a question for
I
me?
do. I've got a question for
Because
you.
we have to wrap it up.
Right, for my business, finance, and because you like music, and y'all can join it too. So my journey going from different businesses into music, every opportunity I get to talk to somebody, I ask questions, I process it, pull it together, and then I regurgitate back. Because I'm curious, I'm seeing a real monetization at scale problem for musicians nowadays. So the question is, if labels aren't giving bonuses like they used to, if the productization, the ability to monetize on the music isn't like it used to be, then there has to be some way for musicians to get seed money to get started or to scale it. So there's 2 concepts I want to get your opinion on. One, franchising. I used to joke about it that a band should franchise. I don't think it's unheard of. And I think it's just a matter of time because when you look at the tribute acts, they're growing, which shows that the consumer just wants the experience. So take a band like Kiss. What the hell? Why can't you have Space Kiss, 70s Kiss, 80s Kiss, all these different Kiss models, but they're franchises. The second thing is from a bonus perspective. If the labels aren't giving bonuses, then bands have to find a new source for seed money. From an investment standpoint, do you see it being a ridiculous ask? Let's say a band wanted to launch, so they created a convertible note, like so many other bands or companies might do.
Yeah.
Do you see a non-traditional investor, an investor that historically would not invest in music, going into something like a convertible note if it managed the risk?
That'd be possible. The only investing I see is when they're buying catalogs. That's like where a lot of venture capital companies are buying, whether even Billy Joel's like, I'm holding out because he wants X amount or whatever I've heard. But like, I know a lot of people have sold their catalogs. That's where they get, because it's like a dividend. It's like a residual that they're going to get. As far as issuing some sort of note for future, I don't know if that would be. It'd have to be a non-traditional investor,
like a 3-year term.
Yeah,
Convertible option. Anyways, it's just something that I've been thinking about, and the franchising piece.
The franchising is interesting because I could see that happening. I could see that if they pay the original band or whoever owns the licensing, pay back.
Well, it may come to that anyways because a lot of these bands are packing it in now. We talk about that a lot. It's like, what's the music business going to look like in 5 years?
Yeah, so my friend plays in a Journey cover band, and he told me there's several of them around the country, and they kill it. And they do 150 shows, they do cruises, and he's like, we're not the only one. We're just mainly on the West Coast, but so. To your point, you could, if AC/DC 50-something years and they're almost done, and I'll do the drum parts. I don't mind. My point.
This could be your future, buddy.
You could sell officially licensed.
So AC/DC could license that out, and people, to your point, would like the experience. I like that idea.
I think it's plausiable.
I think it's,
I think it's something you'll probably see. Like I said, in 5 years, a lot of these guys, you're 80 years old, 85 years old. whether you're still capable of doing it, do you want to?
Right.
Right.
And the ones that are very rare.
We do have
the
to-
Rolling Stones is an exception.
There will be a day where the Beatles, members of the Beatles, all of them, and the Rolling Stones will not be on the planet. It'll be a very, very strange, sad thing for us who love those bands.
It's already happening now, though.
Yes. But
Joey Mullen died last week.
Yeah.
There's no members of Badfinger.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Although Keith Richards is
but-
going to outlive all
I know we should
Absolutely.
I know we do have to
we
wrap
should
this
cut
up.
it, wrap it up, but just remember that ABBA, the band ABBA, has a very successful AI show currently, and the band does not exist, but in AI form, and that'll be another podcast sometime. But that
I want to do
technology,
a podcast with a hologram of Derek Sharp.
A younger, better looking Derek Sharp and Brent Fitz, and then I'll have brown hair and you'll have blonde hair.
you know that's true. His hair is actually brown, and
Yeah,
my real
his
hair
is
is
blonde,
is
yeah.
blonde. So
And I had an afro when I was little.
you
but-
did. I've seen photos.
Joe, thank you so much,
Hey,
buddy.
I can't thank you guys
You know
enough.
how much I love you.
I can't. You guys
I
are
just fucking
awesome.
love you.
I appreciate the friendship, the stories, and hopefully we can do this again.
Let's do it again.
We will.
soon.
That would be wonderful.
Thanks so much for joining.
All right, buddy.
All right.
Yeah.